Hello and welcome to Sustainably Talking Live. Today, we're having an update from China with two absolutely amazing guests. Well, great to be back. This is the third episode of Sustainably Talking, or I suppose it would be episode 70 of the ESG show, because Sustainably Talking is the same as the old ESG show with a couple of differences. Hopefully it's a bit better because we've learned from the ESG show, and we're also broadcasting 3 times a week. Anyhow, let's bring on our guests today. And on the show today, we have got Matthew Gray and Rubio. Matthew Gray is a senior UN advisor on capital markets and geoeconomic risk and a former director at Morningstar Sustainalytics. Hello, Matthew. Good to have you on. Could you perhaps give us a little bit more detail about what you do and what you've been up to?
Sure. Hi, I just came back from China. And for, past 4 or 5 years, I was connecting investors to listed companies across emerging markets that were high risk in terms of sustainability. So institutional investors, bringing them into emerging markets to speak with those companies to better understand. And then recently, I became a UN advisor, working very much at the intersection of what you would say is geopolitical risk, capital, and diplomacy. So it's a pleasure to be here, Michael. Thanks a lot for the invitation.
Well, it's great to have you. And Rubio is an adjunct professor at Macau University of Tourism. Rubio created sustainability breakthroughs for Macau. She is a Macau Government Environmental Committee member and has a sustainability executive role in the hospitality sector and a chairperson of an NGO that advocates food sustainability in the community. Great to have you on, Ruby. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit more about yourself.
First of all, thanks for the invitation, and I'm very honored to be the guest of Michael and also be partnering with Matthew. So I was born in Macau and study and work in Vancouver, Canada, majoring in food science. I began my career with large multinational food manufacturer and like airline catering company, focusing on food safety and quality system. After the liberation of Macau gaming industry in the early 2000s, I returned home to contribute my overseas experience. So about 10 years ago, it was like very lucky that I ended up into a few UN conference where the UN SDGs were launched, which become, I feel like, the seed of my sustainability journey. And since then, my work has evolved toward a more holistic approach that integrates sustainability into the food sector, in particular Macau, the tourism ecosystem. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And Matthew, why did you just go to China?
Well, I think everybody needs to go there from at least once a year, just as a refresher, to see if my previous assumptions were still holding up. I mean, once a year. I was there this time for, I think, 3 weeks, and I was just there to meet with corporations, with some of my old investor networks, of course, the UN several times, and then academics, and just get the word on the street to see, just get a pulse of the land, and to bridge that understanding back to my own networks here in the West. I'm based in Denmark, and then Europe and also North America. They're quite interested in what's happening. So I'm one of those gateways, I think, of just kind of giving updates of what the pulse is happening in China.
Okay, great. And I've got a maths question for you now, Matthew, which is, can you tell me 2 things? So we are, there's the maths too. 2 things that you learned on your recent trip to China.
Oh, only 2 things, heavens.
I tell you what, you can give us a 3rd thing if you want.
Well, the first, you're always reminded when you go to China how there's so many different degrees of development. I mean, they're still very much a developing country, but then they're also hyper developed as well. So that you just have when you turn from lane to lane, or you get on a train or a high speed or a slow speed train. So that's one reminder that you always get. The other one is there's this very much this overtness now that there didn't used to be. Of just kind of talking about geopolitical situations and constraints that China is facing, the savviness that the Chinese have. If I had maybe 50 conversations, all these assumptions and kind of biases and things that we have in the West on China, they all seem to know all of them. And then, yeah, that's something they're also willing to just share and say, look, we know how you think about us, far more than you know that we think. So there was that as well. And the third one is, I would say, just the different generations in China. They have different levels of optimism and pragmatism than they've ever had before, which I wasn't so aware of. But there's different levels of optimism, starting from kind of the oldest people seem to be very optimistic, and then you kind of work your way down to a certain level of pessimism, which turns into a sense of resilience, I found. So that's it.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. Ruby, I wanted to ask you, so one of your things you specialize in, I think you do specialize in, is food sustainability. Can you, first of all, excuse me, can you define, what do you mean by food sustainability?
Sure. I come across that question quite often, especially in Macau. So usually I will explain like food sustainability simply means producing and choosing and eating food in a way that is good for the people and the planet and is in a regenerative manner. So that's pretty much in a nutshell. A lot of people do understand about sustainable development, but when it comes to food, it's about aligning the UN One Health system as well. Like we have to respect environment, the animal welfare, and be conscious of what we use as an antibiotic and so for not polluting the environment, and so that we all can be achieving the health that we are aiming towards.
Okay, and I know you partially answered this, but can you just tell us what sort of the main considerations are?
Yeah, sure. I feel like food is too often neglected when we talk about like climate change, decarbonization, and sustainability, and etc. And there are paradox of food topic, like people eat food, but they get diseases and obesity, versus there a lot of people are still under malnutrition within the same planet. In my part of world, like we are in a very developed city and high GDP, food waste is an issue, versus within the city, maybe still people like not having affordable, accessible food, and so does within the region that people are starving. So I feel like there are a lot of food consideration not being aware by most of the people.
Okay, thank you for that, Ruby. I'm going to have a short chat with Matthew. Don't go away, Ruby. We're going to have a short chat again in a few minutes later. But just for the time being, it's just going to be me and Matthew on the screen. And so, Matthew, let's just go straight in there, shall we?
Sure.
What are the latest developments in China? Well, in particular with the sustainability lens, but what are the latest developments?
Okay, well, I mean, when I went there, I was there at they just launched the 5-year plan, right? So the biggest sign, I guess, moving forward is the 5-year plan is really looking at they've taken, and you're talking sustainability, so it's the industrial policy that they're putting in place is really driving the energy transition there. It's not ESG, it's not competitiveness, but it's being driven by industrial policy. So I would say that's a large point. The other one, of course, is they're investing a lot more in people now. So before they were investing a lot in infrastructure, and then now they're willing to turn that on its head, and they're looking at the labor market, and they're investing a lot more on the next generation that don't really want to do so much agrarian farming and focusing so much on food as they used to be focusing on As I think Ruby was a bit alluding to in addressing some of the food shortages, but now they're focusing much more on the upskilling up the value chain of that. The other ones, of course, is there's robotics are prevalent. The gig economy is all prevalent in the day-to-day life there, so that's freeing up quite a little bit of time. And then, of course, there's all the discussions around, not just the energy transition, but it's moving a lot more from the technology into energy storage now. So there's a lot of discussions on energy storage, energy power lines, what the grids are like, moving into different dual current, long-term energy transmission lines in order to kind of get this clean energy that they're producing in the West to get it east as well. So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of developments coming out there that are worth exploring a bit more. But I'm going to say the capital side is they're also getting quite selective on the foreign capital that comes in, as if I put on my investor lens. So they are open to it, but it's much more on China's terms. And then there was also their meeting with some mining companies, and then also there's a shift, which hopefully we'll be able to talk about today, is a shift in different mining priorities as well, which have a cascade effect into different industries. There's a lot happening there, Michael, as you can imagine.
Okay, well, I certainly want to talk to you about mining in China. But before we get on to that, what about regulation? What's going on in the world as far as regulation is concerned in China?
So the regulatory environment, it's, again, I'll focus on sustainability for the nature of the call. In China, the regulation is really led by it's led by the companies. So the companies depends on where they're listed. Are they listed in Shanghai? Are they listed in Shenzhen? Or are they listed in Hong Kong? Depending on where they're listed, that's the different types of regulation they have, primarily in terms of their disclosures that they have for ESG reporting. That's the first thing to be aware of. The other thing is what they're doing now is, Hong Kong is, of course, the lead, but then for the other two stock exchanges, they're staging the required disclosures based on industry. So they're focusing very much on, the hard to abate ones. So they're focusing on cement, on petrochemicals, on steel, on those ones. So that's where they are with regulation. They're focusing on the heavy industries, and then they're requiring their vendors, their supply chains, to then also ascribe to their requirements for reporting. That's where we're at in terms of regulation in a nutshell.
Okay, thank you for that. So I want to talk to you in particular about, I'm interested in copper and rare earth mining. But before we get onto those topics, can you just give us a brief overview, sort of what's going on with mining in China at the moment?
Oh, mining, right now, it's very much focused on securing the supply chains. That's where we're at now. So the supply chains, they've been playing the long game on this for 15, 20, 25 years back. And then they're also playing it about 15, 20 years ahead, right? So we're in the middle now. And that's Latin America, it's Indonesia, of course, it's Africa. Refining, they have almost all the world's capacity for most of the world's key minerals. And they also have the technology for, how would you say it? For reducing the boiling point of certain elements. So if they're trying to produce aluminum, they're able to get it so it's not 1600 degrees, they're able to get it down to 1300 degrees, using green electrolyzers a little bit differently. So they're adapting certain technologies now. So higher up the value chain for the refining, they have that technology. That's the name of the game, is of course on the refining, but then also beyond that is the academic layer to that. And they have thousands and thousands of PhDs that are focused on, for example, rare earth technologies of processing, but also they have entrepreneurial large grants in order to create small to medium size incubators that are able to also develop new technologies. And that's all sponsored from the academic side. So they have this commercial, the academic, and the industrial, all three working at once. And it is in their industrial policy and their economic policy as well.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because, I'm going to ask you we could talk about copper in a moment, and I think, but something I'm aware of is that there's the one thing that copper and rare earth mining in China has in common is it's not just the mining, it's the expertise that surrounds it. There's the refining of the products. That's where China has suddenly developed, I think, a world that is well ahead of the rest of the world in refining. And it's played a very canny game as well, I think. Okay, so copper. Now, copper is very important to the green transition because all these wind farms and solar farms need connecting to the grid. And if we go down the route of having long-distance transmission, then we'll need an awful lot of copper. And I've often thought that copper is the new gold, or maybe it's the new oil. I don't know. It's the new something. It's definitely going to be important. So what's going on with copper mining in China at the moment?
Sure. Well, a quick final word just on the refining, just so
sure.
Your viewers are a bit clear. Is I think it was January 1st, 2025. If not, it was 2024. They put an export ban on the refining technologies. So even if they had this technology, so they could bring it closer to the source in Zambia, Congo, Indonesia, Chile, they put an export ban on the technology. So now other countries, they have to send it to China, which was quite a savvy move. On copper, yeah, copper, I wouldn't say it's necessarily the new oil. It's more, you can look at it, it's the nervous system of electrification, right? That's how I imagine if I use an analogy for the anatomy, so to speak. So I met with CMOC Mining, and I met with Zhejiang Cobalt. So I've met with some very CMOC Mining. They're the largest mining company in Africa out of China. They're mostly state-owned, but they do have some public shares. And they own the Tingafeta Gumi mine in Congo, and then another one, and then of course they have large parts of the copper belt in Zambia. They have moved dramatically from their cobalt production, where there's also there's restrictions on, and there's quotas from the Congolese government, for example, which have been pressured by the United States in order to limit cobalt exports. But they have all these types of external constraints on cobalt, and they focus now on having copper production at 3 or 4 times fold by 2029. So that's where their focus is on now, because the cobalt price has hit a bare bottom, but it's also rising quite steadily. And that's where they see the future of electrification. And that's just one mining company, and that's, they're a bit of a bellwether for the rest of the industry.
Yeah, it's great. And then of course there's rare earths. Now, I think rare earths are, what I think is quite interesting about rare earths is that they're not actually that rare. they exist all over the place. But the problem with rare earths is that it's what they come with. They're often found closely entwined with other minerals and metals, and it's a separation of the rare earths that is the real trick, I think. And in 1987, President Deng, Ruby, you can correct me on my pronunciation here. President Deng Xiaoping, have I pronounced that rightly? Have I got that right? Well, amazing. How about that? He said the Middle East has oil, China has rare earth. But I believe that today, 71% of rare earths are extracted from China, but 87% are processed in China. So yes, it's by far and away the leader in mining them, but it's got an even bigger lead in refining them. And rare earths is so important for multiple reasons, but one of the reasons is because of magnets. A lot of the rare earths provide the technology for magnets, which is so important. It's important for things like TVs and MRI scanners, but it's so important in the green transition. So Matthew, what are your thoughts about rare earths? Do you have an update on rare earths in China at the moment?
They're one of the keys, right, for the energy transition, for bringing the energy transition to scale. And again, as I mentioned earlier, China has played the long game on this, and they've secured the supply chain on it. It's up to them whether or not they're going to use it to weaponize it economically or politically. They've already used it in order to shield themselves from U.S. tariffs, of saying that they were going to put a 1-year moratorium on exports. So they threatened that. So it can be considered a currency at one point down the road. But one thing just about rare earths is as with the entire energy transition, it's not so. What they do is they're basically, how do you say it? They're kind of exporting it to another area. They're claiming this. So maybe the green transition it's not clean. It's just cleaner somewhere else, so to speak. So there are still things downstream that are worth concerning about. It's not going to solve everything with rare earths because of also the damage they do in other parts of the supply chain in order to procure them. Yeah, but let's just keep it as it's not some sort of parable of an answer or anything. Yeah.
All right. And can you just briefly touch on human rights and mining in China?
It depends on who's watching. The only thing I would say is it's become, if you look at the political agendas when they're meeting with foreign leaders, it's become a moot topic. It's no longer in the 4 or 5 different discussion points. It's no longer also in investor circles. Some of our former investor clients, it is still marginally important to them, but it's actually shifted to other priorities for different risk-adjusted returns in other areas. But human rights, unfortunately, it's for its own right or by its own interpretation, fortunately or unfortunately, it's no longer a topic in high-level discussions, and it shouldn't be considered as an obstacle to any type of engagement with China or with companies, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you for that. And thank you for your comment, Joshua, about premium engineered biochar, I hope I pronounced that correctly, that can now be made into a replacement for copper and lithium. That's certainly something worth doing a bit of research into. I'll look that up. Now, we are running, as ever, a couple of minutes late over. So I'm just going to ask you one question to cover 2 topics, really. One is, where do we stand with energy storage in China? Because obviously that things are moving very, very rapidly over there. I was actually watching a video today about CATL's salt batteries. And also, do you have any thoughts about long distance transmission, HVDC, high voltage direct current, long distance transmission?
Sure. Energy storage it's the name of the game. If you're a car company, say for example you were BYD 25 years ago, you were making little battery cells inside phones, little batteries, and then you brought them to scale for cars. And then the idea is those are going to be brought to such scale with such condensed lithium or sodium or whatever they're going to be using in the future, but it's more or less going to be LFP-based lithium iron phosphate. The idea is that they're just going to get more and more compact. They're going to get even a bit more lightweight, and that energy storage, you're going to be able to transport electricity to more rural or more distant communities. Energy storage is the name of the game, and they're using this the EV transition as almost prototypes about how to do it, the same way that they were using it for mobile phones. So that's something just to keep in mind, and that's the way that a lot of these large Chinese companies are thinking as well. On energy transmission lines, most of the energy used to be produced in Western China, especially coal-based or even wind farms, and then those long-term transmissions. Cables, you would lose a lot of energy along that 2-3 kilometer long journey. But then the moment you get to about the 500 kilometer mark of that long cable, then you would start losing exponentially amount of energy. So you could have a large energy distribution network that over 3,000 kilometers would lose about 75% of its energy. So now of course they're investing a lot more into HVDCs as opposed to HVACs. But the price point is about 4 or 5 times more. But the terrain has already been cleared. Yes, that is a priority, but as manufacturing shifts, like manufacturing locations shift, they are shifting closer to where energy is being produced.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. Ruby, I'm going to have a brief chat with you for a few minutes.
Sure.
I hope you guys are okay to stay on for the next 3 or 4 minutes today, because it does look like we're going to be going 3 or 4 minutes over. So Matthew, I'll say goodbye to you for 5 minutes and bring you back on again in 5 minutes' time. So Ruby,
Yes.
welcome back onto the stage. So how do you apply food as medium to promote sustainability, Ruby?
As I mentioned, food are often neglected when we talk about decarbonization, climate risk, and so forth. So, I mean, couple of years I encountered the magazine, not magazine, but very recognizable journal, which is called Eat Lenses, where they have highlighted food is one of the single strongest lever that brings human and also environmental health in a sustainable way. So how food become a medium to drive sustainability, that's inspired me quite a lot with that evidence and support from a journal. So putting it in a Macau context, I would say Macau has a lot of unique point to offer in that sense. For example, Macau's like Macanese cuisine is defined by UNESCO as a world first fusion cuisine. So it's more like a fusion before fusion become a fashionable thing. And Portuguese and Macanese cuisine is a home-based cooking comfort food before it transformed into a restaurant need. And in Macau, we have a lot of Forbes 5-star service plus the Michelin restaurant. So I would think that will add a little bit touch and connection with the local community and culture in that sense. So with the background and culture of Macau, we are having a lot of spices coming from European, Indian, Southeast Asia, and turn it into the Macanese cuisine. So it's more like a global in origin and local in practice. So I hope that all blend into like food as a media that drive a very diverse, sustainable tourism over. Yeah, so maybe I add on. So in that sense, when more people aware how powerful the food can be in terms of driving sustainability, in a collective way, we can reduce environmental impact for being more conscious with our food waste and where our food come from, and better preserve our culture and support the local livelihood and create a more emotional connection for the visitor so that they will keep returning to Macau as their favorable travel destination. Because as you know, the tourism industry is quite competitive. So everyone have to add values and make a memorable state.
I'm so sorry, Ruby. I was chatting away there, and I didn't realise I wasn't on the screen. Can you talk about the journey from food waste to good taste?
Sure.
I think I'll stay on the screen this time, so I don't forget to bring myself back on.
Yeah. So I think it's more about applying the circular economy concept. I mean, food as an organic matter, like the tea residue, where we drink a lot of tea on a daily basis, the coffee ground, and how we utilize food ingredients from the nose to tail concept. So it's all about innovation, creativity, and how to turn all the whole pieces of ingredients from garnish to beverage, like touch up on favorite, and also all these are adding more values to the offer in the product and services. So in a nutshell, how to turn waste into treasure kind of thing.
Okay. And you're also talking to me about using food as medicine. Can you expand upon that just for a little bit?
Sure. You know, the core idea in Chinese culture, like how food also serve medicine function is that what you eat on a daily basis can also help maintain balance, prevent illnesses, and support healing. So it's while you drinking soup or having a noodle soup, it gives you the healing effect as many food ingredients like the goji berry, jingo, and ginseng, red day, all this all has some sort of medical function in it. So that's a typical Chinese cuisine.
Okay, thank you. And finally, before we bring Matthew back on the stage again, can you talk about food science? What about food science and sustainability? Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Since my background was food science and gradually transferred into the sustainability field, I feel like the food science and sustainability, these two subjects, doesn't compile well on its own. However, these two things does have a cause and solution kind of relationship. Why I say that is food science or food safety creates sustainability challenge in a sense, because food science solved the product like safety, quality, the logistic, the packaging, and so forth. But sustainability examines the actual system and how to manage it in a more holistic way. So if we rethink convenience and put food safety into the picture with the design thinking, so it can turn like food safety or food science into a solution that serve and enhance the sustainable development of the food chain kind of thing.
Okay, thank you for that. And by the way, Ruby and I were just talking before we went live about that rather attractive backdrop you've got there. And Macau looks beautiful. I think you were telling me there's a big Portuguese influence there, but it looks really nice. I definitely want to go to Macau, I think.
Sure, very welcome.
Well, no, I will. I went to Hong Kong many years ago, and I'd like to go back to that part of the world. Matthew, good to have you back on the stage again. So Matthew, the other day you were talking to me about the pollution journey of an emerging market, how the priorities change as the market develops. Can you just go over that a little bit?
Sure. I've worked most of my life in the developing countries. So, I mean, if you're going at the very bottom, if you're an extremely offline, underdeveloped country, call it South Sudan, then you don't have any pollution issues. The moment you start going up, you start getting into a bit of industry. Yes, pollution starts to affect you, then it usually comes in the form of air pollution. So then you start looking at your environs and you think, okay, we have to address the air pollution. Then you start thinking, what's inside your home? Okay, we have to address the air pollution. Now we have to address maybe things that we eat or that we consume. So as Ruby is saying, food issues. So you start thinking about, well, what's happening with the quality of our ground? If you're a country that's at that stage, for example, maybe you've gone from developing to developed, then you start thinking, well, we've kind of addressed the air pollution issue. Now let's start focusing on the food or on the water that we're drinking. That's what's happening in China right now, is they've more or less addressed the air pollution, definitely in the cities and the population centers. And then there is an issue now where there's a lot of ground pollution going into the soils, and then there is a water pollution issue. Then the final stage is once you do have all of that figured out, I mean, I'm oversimplifying, in a country like Denmark where I am, then you start looking well beyond your borders and you start being concerned about the ocean's pollution, wider atmospheric trends, climate change, well beyond your neighborhood, your family, your home, the water that you drink. And China right now is not so much focusing on the oceans yet. That's not necessarily their objective. It's really focusing about land, consumer, health, and then also, as Ruby mentioned, this One Health approach of the WHO, which is actually where I'm sitting right now. If I show you my backdrop, I'm actually in WHO's office. So it doesn't compete with yours in Macau. I'd rather be there, frankly, when I am at work. But yeah, the One Health system is that everything is quite integrated, right? From the animals to the air, to the food, to our health systems as well internally. And then that holistic kind of composition between them, that's, I think, where China is starting to become at. And they have the wherewithal, they have the expertise, they have the political will to start focusing again on land and water pollution.
Okay. So when you said you were at the WHO, I was tempted to say who, but I decided that was a little bit too corny, really. Ruby, so
Yeah.
what are your thoughts about that? The pollution journey and where China sits on that journey at the moment. Do you have anything to add about that?
Yeah, I echo a bit more with Matthew's sharing. So in the past, China did focus more about banning the foreign plastic waste getting into the country in 2018, and then starting to put more attention about food security, where a lot of food safety scandal and affecting the health of people, and towards the anti-food waste law in 2021. And now within the nation, they also trying hard to reduce a lot of single-use plastic within the food and hospitality and e-commerce sector. So, as it developed, how they harmonize the regulations and applying technology and being more transparent with the productions and more reporting system and monitoring. Things are like gradually falling into a more manageable manner. And I can feel when I go to the GBA area where I used to travel around, I can see more healthy, high quality produce are very accessible and affordable to the citizen. So it's a good way for the better life of the citizen in general, that I can feel it.
Okay, all right, thank you. So Matthew, you talked to me recently about the industrialization of food production in China. Can you just expand on that, please?
Food production or reduction?
Ah, it must be a typo. Reduction. Yeah.
Well, it could be either. So it's, again, it goes back to just the labor trends that are happening right now. So here at the UN, we have the projections that China's population is going to go from 1.4 billion down to 700 million. That's half of its population by 2100. So that's 3 generations. And then if you plan for that, then you need to have those 700 hands, and say 20% of them or 25% are children, 20% are retired. So you have 50% of those who have any utility really for the economy or for the population. So you have maybe 300 million people. Do you want to have half of those people working in the fields, or do you want to focus on, getting them into higher value output roles, and utility, and then maybe you can have the industrialization or the industrialization 4.0 taking care of the food production, and then maybe China becoming a food eventual exporter. That's where China's at right now, where again, they're trying to be self-sufficient in almost every single industry. They're not quite there with food, but there is also a theory that China has a economics term here, but a comparative advantage in every industry, in every sector. And then one of them now is food production as well. I don't know if you're aware of this, but the largest amount of caviar that's produced in the world is actually produced in China. Truffles, China, competing with France, of course. So that's still done by artisanal, but then in large scale, and foie gras is also China. But on the industrial level, for agrarian, for rice, for noodles, for wheat, for rice, for barley, for food stock, for soya, they want to reduce the imports coming in from Brazil and others. They want to produce it themselves. They need much more heavy industrialization in that direction. And they're aware of it. And they have their economic and also their sustainability planning going in that direction as well.
Okay, thanks. So Ruby, when I come to Macau, I can binge on caviar and truffles.
Oh, sure.
I
Yes,
look
in
forward to
fact,
that. I look forward to that. Yeah.
China
yeah.
made in China, and you'll be proud.
Yes, we use quite a lot of sustainable seafood straight from China. Yeah, caviar
Okay.
is typical.
Great. All right. I look forward to that. So Ruby, you suggested to me that China is in a process of transitioning from food quality more to environmental issues. Can you just expand upon that a little bit, please?
Sure. Especially with the new the 15 5 years plan, and there's a new green code. Is The full name is Ecological and Environmental Code, which is a landmark comprehensive law, which recently taken like passed the legislation and taking effective in August this year. So this is more like a technical, like high level policy document and serve as a foundation legal enforcement framework for the coming 5 years, and providing a mandate legal structure and consolidating the existing over 30 something regulation to fix the fragmented environmental law. So, in China, a lot of national owned food industry or agriculture sector that they are mandated to comply ESG reportings and disclosure. So, with the proper structure coming from top down and with the key stakeholder holding more responsive and accountable. So that's how I see how they transit from basic safety to high quality and kicking with smart technology and more conscious about protecting the ecosystem and environment and being more sustainable way of growing produce and be more mindful with the waste. And recently, there's also regulation enforcing having more organic waste to be the input of the energy source, like producing energy as part of the supplement of the fossil fuel. So all this like bringing the production and waste stream as part of the whole picture, I do think it helps to reduce pollution and irresponsible of resources use.
Okay, thank you for that. So Eric, I think I don't know whether he was being totally serious. He was saying, all very well, caviar and truffles being made in China, but what about foie gras? I don't know if you know the answer to that question, but it strikes me as being a very French thing. But
No, I did. I mentioned it earlier. Yeah, it is foie gras as well. So
oh,
that's
is it really? Wow.
So that's where they force
Wow.
feed. They force feed the geese. And then the geese, so their foie is the French word for liver. So their liver gets so big it's about to explode, and then right before it explodes, they call the geese, and then they're able to curate, and then that's what it is, right? Okay. So yes, China is also the leader in foie gras now by volume in the world.
Very, very interesting. Thank you for your
comment,
comment,
I don't
Eric.
think they still doing that kind of practices.
I hope not.
Maybe it's done more sustainably now. Maybe they ask for the geese.
Yeah, I was just thinking. I was just thinking that. I was just thinking that. I'm not a big fan of animal cruelty, to be honest. But we are 9 minutes over, and yet there's a very important topic. And so I'm going to ask you I'm just going to ask you to give it a minute each, really. And that's the issue of demographics. China's population is falling very fast, and I think it's projected to fall even further. I know, Matthew, you've got some data about that. Let me hand over to you first, Matthew, and then I give the last few words to Ruby. China, demographics, what's going on?
Yeah, that's more or less what I mentioned earlier. So we have the forecast going from 1.4 billion down to 700 million. And then it's, again, if you look at those that are in the working class that are providing utility, it's about how do you get so much more utility out of those individuals. and you want to keep them higher into high value industries, and that could be technological, probably most likely. So that so for every hour that they, or for every yuan, every kwai that they make, that basically has to serve so many other people. It has to serve the pensioners, it has to serve the youth as well. So it's going to be about a 1-to-2 ratio. So for every person working, they're going to have to also finance 2 other people. Whereas now it's inverted. It's about 5-to-1. So that's a large demographic challenge. The use of resources isn't going to be a problem. The big question that comes out of this, of course, similar to Japan, is immigration. Will China ever be open to wider immigration? Will they need it or not? Maybe across Southeast Asia would be very good, and maybe that's kind of the modeling they're working on developing a lot of tourism exchanges. Maybe they're also trying to assess which nationalities would be more appropriate living the Chinese way and not challenging it. That's a whole other
Okay, that's really interesting. I'd like to give you the last words here, Ruby. And it's a sort of a twofold thing. You mentioned to me about the 5-year plan and how that ties in with the demographic challenge. But I'm also very interested in automation in China as well, because of course that's the other potential fix to the problem of an aging population and indeed a declining population. So can you just very briefly just go over those 2 topics, and then we'll have to pack up.
Sure. I think in the 5 years plan, they put quite a strong emphasizing on the smart technology, in particular the AI and advancing robot as the core driver on economic growth. I think they make this very strong shift from infrastructure leading kind of growth to high quality development driven with new quality like productive force. So what does that mean is they are putting more focusing on digitalized economic expansion and the smart manufacturing and logistics. So with these 2 things, a lot of people are quite scared that it means a lot of people will be like out of job, but in fact it's more like bringing people into a better life, better off with more work-life balancing things and a more humanoid kind of a robot. In fact, it helps the aging population to move out and do exercising and even cleaning work at household. So that's my like really surface understanding at the moment how this like fit into the topic.
Okay, well, Ruby and Matthew, thank you very much indeed. And we'll be back on Thursday with Sustainably Talking. Thank you, and thank you for watching.